There is a main street in the central west of New South Wales that has not had a car drive down it in 11 years. The buildings are still standing. The pub still has glasses on the bar. The general store still has a price list in the window from 2013. Nobody has come for the mail. The town does not appear on most maps anymore. The road that once connected it to the highway has been partially reclaimed by grass growing through cracked bitumen. If you drive past the turnoff, you will miss it. If you turn in and drive the 4 kilometres of deteriorating track to the main street, you will find a place that stopped in the middle of doing what it was doing and never started again. This is New South Wales, the oldest state, the most populous, and beneath its surface, beneath the Blue Mountains and the Hunter Valley vineyards and the wheat fields and the grazing country, there are ghost towns that the state has allowed to quietly disappear. 13 of them. Some are well documented. Some barely appear in any public record. Some are places you have driven past on major highways without knowing they existed. And number 1 is a place that should not have been abandoned because it was not economically exhausted. It was abandoned because of a decision made by one man, in one afternoon, that left a community with no future and no recourse. Stay with me to the end. New South Wales was the first European settlement in Australia. From 1788, the colony expanded into the Blue Mountains, across the tablelands, down the rivers, into the backcountry. Towns appeared wherever the resources were, wherever gold was found, wherever timber could be cut, wherever the soil could support grain or the pasture could support sheep. Towns appeared, and then, when the resource was exhausted or the economics shifted, they were left. Some were left quickly. Some faded over decades. Some are still fading, not ghost towns yet, but heading there, losing one family and one service at a time. These are the ghost towns of New South Wales that you were never meant to see. Number 13. Pullamacca Station and the Silver Rush Remnants, Far West New South Wales. In the far west of New South Wales, between Broken Hill and the South Australian border, there are ruins so isolated that most people who know they exist have never visited them. The Pullamacca area was the site of silver and lead prospecting in the decades before Broken Hill's silver lode was discovered. Small camps, short-lived mining operations, the infrastructure of optimism that the Far West produced in the 1870s and 1880s before Broken Hill scale made everything around it irrelevant. What remains is the archaeology of an era. Stone foundations in the red dirt. The faint outlines of tracks that connected camps to water. A well, still intact, that was the center of a small community for perhaps 5 years before that community moved on. The distances from any established settlement were enormous. The heat was extreme. The water was scarce. When the return did not materialize, or when Broken Hill drew all the attention and capital, they left without ceremony. Nobody has lived in the Pullamacca area for over a century. Number 12. Hartley, Blue Mountains, New South Wales. Hartley sits in the Hartley Valley on the western side of the Blue Mountains, about 120 kilometres from Sydney. Established in the 1830s as a major service town on the Great Western Road, it was at its peak a significant administrative and commercial centre, a courthouse, hotels, churches, a jail, all the infrastructure of a colonial town that expected to grow. Then the railway came. The Great Western Railway bypassed Hartley in favour of a more direct route through Lithgow. Overnight, the town that existed because of the road lost the reason for the road's traffic. The coaches stopped. The travellers stopped stopping. The commerce collapsed. Hartley did not disappear entirely. A small population remained for decades, but the town never recovered. The buildings became too large for the diminishing population. The courthouse was decommissioned. The hotels closed. What survives at Hartley is one of the most intact collections of colonial-era sandstone architecture in New South Wales, now heritage listed and managed by the National Parks and Wildlife Service. But it is empty, with the specific emptiness of a place that was bypassed rather than exhausted. Number 11. Hill End, Central West New South Wales. Hill End is not fully a ghost town. Around 50 people still live there. But at its peak in 1872, it had a population of approximately 8,000, making it briefly the largest inland town in New South Wales. The gold discovery in the late 1860s produced one of the richest fields in Australian history. The Holterman Nugget, found at Hill End in 1872, was the largest single mass of gold ever found anywhere on Earth, weighing 286 kilograms. When the alluvial gold was exhausted, the deep reef mining that replaced it required capital the individual diggers did not have. The large mining companies moved in, then moved on. The population collapsed. What Hill End has now is heritage listing and a small tourism industry built on its extraordinary photographic record. Photographer Beaufoy Merlin documented Hill End at its peak in 1872. Walking through Hill End today with Merlin's photographs is one of the most unsettling experiences a NSW ghost town offers. The buildings in the photographs and the ruins on the ground match in specific, identifiable ways, and the scale of the loss is precisely documented. Number 10. Yarranderi, Blue Mountains hinterland, New South Wales. Yarranderi sits in the remote southern Blue Mountains, accessible by a long unsealed road or a four-wheel drive track, surrounded by National Park. At its peak in the early 20th century, it had a population of around 2,000, built on silver mining. Its main street had hotels, a school, a hospital, and the infrastructure of a community that believed the silver would outlast its lifetime. It did not. By the 1920s, the accessible ore was exhausted. The population left. The buildings were partially demolished, partially collapsed, and partially left standing. What makes Yarranderi notable is the quality of survival. Several buildings remain structurally intact, heritage listed and maintained by the landowners who have managed the property for decades. The old post office. A hotel building. They stand in the National Park as an unusually complete record of an early 20th century silver mining town. The silence at Yarranderi is the silence of country that was briefly very loud and has been quiet again for a century. Number 9. Sofala, Central West New South Wales. Sofala claims to be the oldest surviving gold rush town in Australia. Gold was discovered here in 1851, months before the more famous Ballarat and Bendigo strikes in Victoria, and a town grew almost immediately. At its peak, the surrounding Turon River goldfields supported a population of tens of thousands. Today, Sofala has a permanent population of around 50. The Royal Hotel still operates. Several colonial-era buildings still stand. The Turon River still runs through the valley, its banks still showing the signs of the gold workings, the disturbed ground, the tailings, the specific topography of ground systematically searched by thousands of people. Sofala is not quite a ghost town, but it is ghost town adjacent. What it has that most ghost towns have lost is continuity. The Royal Hotel has been continuously operating since the gold rush era. The town has simply contracted, steadily and inexorably, from tens of thousands in the 1850s to 50 today, while maintaining enough of a thread of occupation to keep the ghost from being quite complete. Number 8. Newnes, Wollemi Wilderness, New South Wales. Newnes is in the Wollemi Wilderness north of Lithgow, accessible by a dirt road that requires careful driving. Built in the early 20th century to process oil shale, the Newnes Shale Oil Works operated from 1906 to 1932, producing kerosene and other petroleum products from the Woolgan Valley's oil-bearing shale. The works closed when cheap imported oil made shale processing uneconomical. The town, hotel, workers' accommodation, school, the infrastructure of a functioning industrial community, was abandoned within years of the closure. What remains includes the ruins of the oil retorts, the workers' quarters, the hotel, and the extensive infrastructure of an early 20th century industrial operation. The specific quality of Newnes as a ghost town is industrial. Where most NSW ghost towns are remnants of extractive industries, Newnes is the remnant of a processing industry. The shale is still in the valley walls. The oil is still in the shale. What Newnes ran out of was not resource but economics. Number 7. Golgong, Central West New South Wales. Golgong is not fully a ghost town. About 2,000 people still live there. But in 1872, Golgong had a population of around 20,000, the largest single concentration of people anywhere in inland New South Wales at that time. The gold was alluvial, and alluvial gold runs out quickly when enough people are looking for it. Golgong is on this list because of what it represents, the town that was famous, photographed, written about, that appeared in the diaries and letters of tens of thousands of people, and then contracted to a fraction of its former size while keeping enough going to avoid the label of ghost town entirely. Henry Lawson grew up near Golgong. His writing about the town is part of the literary record of what it was. The Prince of Wales Opera House, built in 1871, is still standing. The 10,000 people who once needed an opera house are not. Number 8 in this sequence but 6th in our count. Wollongam, Blue Mountains hinterland, New South Wales. In the upper Blue Mountains, north of Lithgow in the country that drains into the Colo River system, there was a timber-getting settlement called Wollongam. It existed in the early 20th century to harvest the hardwoods that the Federation building boom required. It was never a formal town, no post office, no school, no church. It was a camp, workers' huts, a sawmill, the infrastructure of a transient industry that moved with the timber. When the accessible timber was exhausted, Wollemi was abandoned without ceremony. The sawmill machinery was removed. The huts were left. The forest grew back. Today, the forest has reclaimed the site so completely that finding it requires specific knowledge of where to look. The hut foundations are beneath decades of leaf litter. The sawmill site is identified only by the flat cleared ground growing different vegetation from the surrounding bush. This is what the Blue Mountains does to things left within its reach. Number 5 in our count. Adaminaby, Snowy Mountains, New South Wales. Old Adaminaby is beneath Lake Eucumbene. The lake was created by the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme in the 1950s, and when the valley was flooded, the town that had stood there for a century went under with it. Residents were relocated to a new town on higher ground before the flooding. In drought years, when Lake Eucumbene dropped significantly, the ruins of Old Adaminaby emerge from the water. Streets become visible. Foundation outlines appear. Occasionally, structural remnants surface. This is one of the most unsettling ghost town experiences available in New South Wales, standing on the shore in a drought year and seeing the outlines of a drowned main street. The town is not ruined in the conventional sense. It is preserved by the water that covers it, simply inaccessible. And occasionally, briefly, accessible again. The people who were relocated were given new houses and told to leave the old town behind. Some drove back one last time to see the water rising over their former homes. Some never went back at all. Number 4 in our count. Captain's Flat, Southern Tablelands, New South Wales. Captain's Flat is not fully abandoned. A small population still lives there. But the mine that built the town also poisoned it, and the poisoning has shaped everything since. The Captain's Flat copper, lead, and zinc mine operated from the 1880s through its major production period in the 20th century. When it closed in 1962, it left behind tailings dams and contaminated ground that continue to affect the local environment. The Molonglo River has carried mine contamination downstream, affecting water quality as far as Canberra, since before the mine closed. The specific legacy of Captain's Flat is the intersection of industrial abandonment and environmental contamination. Agricultural activity is restricted. The river is compromised. The tailings dams require ongoing monitoring. Some people stayed after the mine closed because Captain's Flat was their home. They live in a town that carries its industrial history in the soil and the water, in a legacy that the mining company did not stay to manage. Number 3 in our count. Trunky Creek, Central West New South Wales. Trunky Creek is not a ghost town. It has a population of around 200. A pub open on weekends. A hall that hosts community events. Residents who have lived there for generations and intend to continue. But it is on this list because it represents the third category of NSW ghost town. Not the places that stopped suddenly, not the places that faded over decades, but the places currently in the process of deciding what they are. Places where the trajectory is clearly downward but the destination has not yet been reached. Trunky Creek was a significant gold rush settlement. At its peak in the 1850s and 1860s, thousands worked the surrounding creeks and gullies. Today, 200 people. A pub open on weekends. And the specific quality of a community that is fighting, consciously and with effort, against the trajectory that has taken similar towns to zero. Whether Trunky Creek will still be inhabited in 50 years is a question none of its current residents can answer with certainty. The ghost is not here yet, but the shadow of it is. Number 1. Delta, Hunter Valley Coalfields, New South Wales. Delta was a company town. Built by a coal mining company to house workers at a specific mine in the Hunter Valley Coalfields. It had houses, a school, a community centre, sporting facilities. It was designed, built, managed, and ultimately closed by the company that owned the mine. When the mine closed, the company made the decision that company towns always make. It withdrew. The houses were emptied. The school was closed. The services terminated. The town was switched off. Unlike towns that faded over decades, Delta was ended by a single corporate decision made in a boardroom somewhere that was not Delta. The people who lived there were given notice and relocation assistance and told that Delta was finished. Most of them left because they had no choice. The specific thing that Delta represents, the thing that makes it number 1 on this list, is the vulnerability of a community whose existence depends entirely on a single employer's decision to continue existing. Every company town in Australia carries this vulnerability. Delta is the version that became visible. The buildings are still there. The streets are still there. The community centre is still there. Everything the company built remains, because it left without demolishing it, and nobody has taken it over, and the bush is working on reclaiming it at the pace the bush works at, patient and certain and ultimately complete. Someone made a decision in an afternoon. And Delta stopped. That is what you were never meant to see. Share this video. Subscribe. And the next time you drive through a town that looks like it is fading, look closely. The ghost is usually already forming. See you in the next one.